hire people who actually do what they're supposed to do. Someday I'll put systems and processes in place so that the business doesn't have to have every single decision made by me. But for some reason, maybe it's just the fact that they're a business owner, they never get off of someday I'll. Welcome to the Business Brains B.S. podcast, the podcast for people building businesses, battling their own brains, and occasionally stepping in a little BS along the way. So today we got kind of an interesting topic. Our topic is someday I'll. So what do I mean by someday I'll? Well, very often when business owners start their business, they have a desire for something, right? They have a desire for freedom. They have a desire for financial freedom or time freedom or whatever it might be, but they have this vision of what it's going to be like to be a business owner and how it's ultimately going to help them and their families. And then somewhere along the way, they get stuck on an island, and that's an island that I like to call someday I'll, right? Someday I'll sell my business. Someday I'll hire people who actually do what they're supposed to do. Someday I'll put systems and processes in place so that the business doesn't have to have every single decision made by me. But for some reason, maybe it's just the fact that they're a business owner, they never get off of someday I'll. So today we're going to focus on that, and I'm going to pick on Greg here a little bit and ask him, do you have a someday I'll?
Well, yeah, for sure. I got a couple come to mind. One is like more probably the I don't know, the stereotypical kind of dream, and then I've got one that's more like tied to what I do for a living. I mean, there's the obvious, like, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but the someday I'll like retire to a nice warm beach somewhere, kind of not completely off the map, but kind of secluded, where I can have a little privacy and and just spend my days, staring at the ocean and strumming the guitar or something. That's one someday I'll. Um, but then there's like when I think about like what I do for a living, um, I guess what you'd say is someday I'll be able to just do what I like to do without having to worry about if or how that pays the bills. I was just I've been reading the book Lonesome Dove. You ever read that?
No, I thought you said Lone Survivor. I've read that. I have not read Lonesome Dove. I remember watching maybe the TV show or the movies, but go ahead anyway.
Yeah. Man, I had heard it was a really good book, and it is. I'm about 90% of the way through it probably, and it's really good. Um, but there's a really minor character in the book. He's only in it for basically like a scene or what, if it was a TV show, he'd be in half an episode. Um, but he's a doctor that lives in this, small town along the cattle trail, in Nebraska. And one of the other characters, this female character, has had a baby along her travels and has had complications and is not doing very well. And so they take her into this town and get her to this doctor, and the doctor's taking care of her. And you in the book, they kind of tell her experience kind of from her point of view, her time with this doctor. And, she's kind of in and out of consciousness at first, she's losing a lot of blood and that kind of thing. And when she starts to kind of come back around and realizes what's going on, she's thinking about, okay, I'm in this house. This doctor this seems to be where he lives, and she's kind of taking note of him and what's going on. And one of the concerns she gets is about money, and because she doesn't have any money, and she's realizing she's been here for several days, and he's done a lot of stuff, and she tells him like, I don't have any money. Um, I don't know what we're going to do here. And he tells her, basically, don't worry about it. And he says, I came here to get away from money. And you don't really get a backstory. You don't, get the whatever trauma he went through to get him to that point. But you just get the idea that he was somewhere else and things didn't go the way he wanted them to. And money was a part of that. He's like, I'm going to come here and I'm just going to do what I do and not worry about how much I make from it. And when I read that, when he just said that, like, I came here to get away from money, I'm just here helping people like you I thought, oh my gosh, that would be so freeing, you know? Because at the end of the day, I like doing what I do, you know? But I have bills to pay too. So there's a whole structure, this whole way of doing things that goes around that. And to have that like freedom of just like, I can still help people. I can still do what I do, but it doesn't matter if, how much money comes in off of it. That would just hearing that in the book, I'm like, "Oh, that would be so freeing, man." So that's a Sunday I'll is Sunday I'll be at a place in my life that not that I don't have to worry about money or have money, but Sunday I'll be in a place where I can just if I wanna help someone along the way, I just can, and it won't matter if I get paid from it or not.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes to, the security that can come from building a business that is profitable and worth something, right? Because if you build the business, and I know you're saying, I came here to get away from money, that didn't mean he didn't have any money, right? He may have had, $1 million in the bank and just trying to get away from his parents.
Right, and that was part of the thought process, in that part of the book. Part of my thought process was like, yeah, like I said, you don't get a backstory, on this guy, and obviously, like, they're in a house, like, where the house comes from somewhere, you know? They do make it seem like he lives kinda, um, he's pretty, low standard of living, but, uh but yeah, to your point, expenses never completely disappear, right?
So it sounds like your someday I'll is I'll have enough. I'll have enough, right? Enough that I don't have to worry, right? I'll have enough to be able to take care of my wife and my children and my grandchildren, maybe be able to put some money in an account to, whatever it is. And I think that goes back to the dream, right? That really is the dream that you're talking about there is my someday I'll be able to do whatever I want to do, help whoever I want to help without having to worry about, am I going to have to rob Peter to pay Paul to do it? Right. So I think for the someday I'll, it's really important to kind of to backwards plan. And we may have talked about dream, goal, learn, plan, act on the podcast before. I don't remember if we have, but really, it's a nice way to backward plan. So you say, okay, this is my big dream, right? I want to be able to have a house on the beach. I want to be able to have a house on a beach and a house in the mountains, right? Whatever that dream is. It may be something huge. I want to have a nationwide company that is publicly traded. Different people have different dreams, but I think that the first thing is getting that clarity on that, right? That someday I'll have this. And then it's to start making little micro goals to get there, right? So in order to have that, I've got to get to this level, and I'm right here. What are the goals I need to hit along the way in order to do that? So you talked in one of our episodes about having a yellow Ferrari, and not that you want one, but you mentioned a yellow Ferrari, right? If your goal was to have that yellow Ferrari, and you're currently driving a 2002 beat up VW Passat, jumping from the Passat to the Ferrari is probably not realistic. You're probably going to want a couple of mid-level cars in there on the way to that Ferrari. So it's the same thing with these goals of saying, okay, I know where I want to go now. I need clarity. I need a roadmap on how I'm going to get here. And in most cases, we don't know how to do that. So we've got to figure out what is it that I know that's going to help me achieve these goals, and what is it that I don't know that I need to learn, right? Because the more you, what is the saying? The more you learn, the more you earn. But when you can figure out what you need to do or what you need to learn, that's going to help you achieve those goals, right? Then you put a plan in place. All right, how am I going to get there? What's the plan I'm going to take now that I have my learnings, my goals? What am I going to do? What are my strategies and my tactics? And then the most important thing there is to take action, right? Someday I'll be here. Well, if I say someday I'll be in New York and I never buy a plane ticket or I never get in a car and start driving that way, then I'm stuck right here on Someday Isle.
Yeah, it's interesting. My wife and I were just talking about that last night. Like it's easy and sometimes even feels good to like sit and talk about, we didn't call it Someday Isle, but talk about how you want things to be at a certain point. But you also have to do something in the here and now. The present needs attention as well. Um, to get to that, and then so we were talking about how sometimes that's the struggle is, what is the thing to do right here today? That's often harder than making the plan for down the road. Um, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it all goes together. If you, or at least I think so. If you don't have that bigger goal in mind, at least for me, I'm often not as motivated to do the thing here today.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, going back to the learn part, the learn may not be reading or looking up stuff on the internet or whatever it is, having Chat GPT create you a plan. The learning may be working with somebody else, right? Finding a financial planner who's really good at what they do and sitting down with them and saying, okay, these are our dreams and our goals. This is what we have saved up, right? The act may be, okay, if we really want to do this, the more time we have, the better chance we have of reaching that goal. If we really want to do this, we need to start setting aside $50 per paycheck, and putting it into an account or whatever it is in order to get there. Because I think so many people get caught up in everything that's going on that Someday Isle actually turns into a prison, right? They're stuck on the island. Instead of trying to get off and get to that next location, they just kind of sit there on the beach dreaming about what it's going to look like, and they never take the action to do it.
Yeah. So from your experience, where do you think people get hung up the most on that journey?
That's a really good question. I think it's that I think a couple of things. I think that that in their mind there's always going to be time, right? So it's this is just a season I'm in right now where the business is crazy and I can't find good people, and it's a market where nobody wants to pay my price, right? And they're making a bunch of excuses, and they're not stopping to say, okay, this is what I've got going on. How am I going to address it? How am I going to deal with it? And when you stop and take a step back and say, okay, this very easily could turn into the next 10 years of my life or the next 10 years of my business if I don't do something about it now. But I think they find themselves in denial, right? It's like, okay, if I just keep my head down, if I just keep working harder, it's going to get better. And there's that whole saying, or that old saying, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The next best time is now, right? So recognizing that you're in that situation and actually starting to take action and do something about it. And it may not always work, but the good thing is when you start to take that action, you start to notice what's working and what isn't. Yeah. And I think I think something else that keeps business owners from getting where they need to be is they're not taking the time to stop and look at the things that they need to look at.
Okay, so you're talking about, people make the mistake of thinking they have more time. And that, what that brings to my mind, I know somebody who just died recently, unfortunately, from a long battle with cancer. And while this person and everyone around them knew that the cancer wasn't necessarily getting better the way they wanted it to, I don't think anyone, including the person that passed, expected it to happen the day it did. So it wasn't a surprise, but it kind of was a surprise. And when I found out that this person had passed away, I was thinking about everything they were doing in their last days. And it was a lot of busyness and a lot of trying to take care of things that needed to be taken care of, but all of a sudden didn't matter at all. And I was thinking, man, like that's because I guarantee if you'd have asked this person, like, okay, you got 3 days left, how do you want to spend them? They would have come up with a different list of things. And it's that, so you say like people make the mistake of thinking they have more time. That's something we all know. It's like the cliche thing. We all know anything could happen at any time. and I feel like this is supposed to be a question that I'm supposed to answer being the therapist, but you're the one talking about time. So I'm going to ask you, like, how do we deal with that? That seems like just part of the human nature. It's just a flaw we all make that of like not really understanding that.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's funny because my brain went about seven different places there. So let's see if I can put this all together in an even remotely cohesive response. Yeah, I think one of the things is to slow down and to find some gratitude, right? Because so often I think we get so caught up in everything, and everything is so busy around us that we don't take the time, it's cliche again, to stop and smell the roses, right? So how often do I come home and, brush by my wife and go change out of my school clothes or whatever it is, and then, we get ready, have dinner or whatever it is, sit in front of the television, and we don't take the time to connect, right? Versus saying, okay, you know what? I'm grateful for this time, and I should use it more intently, right? So one of the first episodes of the podcast we talked about the Eisenhower matrix, and we talked about using a scale or a filter of important, not important, urgent, and not urgent. And I think that that is really a great way to look at it, because when you start to peel the onion back, these days we spend so much time on the not urgent, not important, Facebook. I mean, we can all set our phone now to tell us how much screen time we have, right? And I get that report at the end of each week, and I look at it, and I'm usually in the 3 hours. All right, now that includes phone calls and text messages, and I have an app that I use at the gym, and I've got a mindset app and all that type of stuff. But still, you take all of that stuff out, how much of my time that I could have been doing something productive with have I been wasting there, right? But then I'll complain that I'm too busy, I can't get things done. But if I stop and really do an assessment and say, okay, how am I spending my time? Am I spending my time on things that are not urgent and not important? Then maybe that's something I can take out, right? That'll help me devote more time toward achieving that dream, right? Getting off of someday I'll. You move in from that, and it's probably my favorite. And this is what I see most with business owners is urgent but not important, right? So they think that something is urgent, but it really isn't important. And most of the time that involves an email, a phone call, somebody else is involved. And it's one of those things where it's urgent on their end, or it may just be, hey, the phone's ringing. And we've all been conditioned now, right? You get that little spike of dopamine whenever the phone dings or rings or whatever it is, to pick that up and say, okay, it's got to be something important. What is it? And it's just somebody sending you a text message to try to sell you something, right? But it's pulled you out of your flow. So, and on a little bit of a side note there, one of the things that I learned several years ago that I've done that has been such a blessing for me as far as my time is I've turned off all notifications on my phone. Now, I still have my notification screen, so when I want to, I can take my phone, scroll up on it, and see whatever, text messages, phone calls, whatever, emails, whatever it might be there. But it doesn't constantly ding and ring and buzz, and I keep it on do not disturb. Probably the only time I take it off of do not disturb is if I am expecting an important phone call. And that has helped me with my time so much. So you move from there to urgent and important, right? And urgent and important are the things that, making sure that the electric bill's paid, making sure that there's gas in the car, whatever those things might be that fall in that urgent and important right now. But then you get to not urgent but important. And I think this goes to what you're talking about here is that if we can really focus our times on the things that are important but not urgent, then fewer and fewer of them should fall into the urgent and important, right? Because if we take care of them while they're just important, then they're off the plate. And I think so many people don't stop and think about that and think about, okay, well, what are things in my life that are important but not urgent? And I think it's things like time with family, right? It's going to the gym, it's education, learning, right? All of those things, I cannot do those today, and tomorrow I'll wake up and be just fine. But long term, those are all going to have an impact. And I think the same thing goes with your business, right? Putting a plan together, having those dreams, those goals, the learning, taking the action. And those are the things that help you get off a someday aisle and move forward, is taking the time to focus on what's important, but not necessarily urgent.
Yeah, because that's like you say, going back to like the feeling like I have all the time in the world. Um, if you have that end goal in mind and you're doing it right, you're working towards it, but there are no fires along the way because you're tending to the important things as you go. Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. I think every now and then I run into somebody who kind of has the opposite problem. I think maybe I might be wrong here. I might be generalizing or I might be projecting, but I think a lot of business owners are kind of forward thinking. You know, they spend that time on Sunday aisle, you know, wondering like what's going to be down the road. But then there are some people who are very just like right here, right now, don't think much past that. Um, and what I think of when I think of that is like there's this you know, kind of well known, he's deceased now, this guy that um, you know, did a lot of like teaching on meditation and different things like that. And he wrote this book. His name's Ram Dass, I should say Ram Dass. And he wrote a book called Be Here Now. That was probably his most famous publication. And it's all about just like being present in the moment, not getting caught up in the past and the future and things like that, which is all it's very useful. It's very useful for your mental health, very useful for your relationships and things like that, being focused on the person in front of you and all those things. Um, but I remember toward the end of his life, I saw this video that he made where he was just in tears and apologizing because he felt bad because he was having to rely on everyone else. He was at the end of his life and he just didn't have things in place to support himself at the end of his life, and he felt guilty that he was having to live basically off the kindness of others. Now, I would say that I think the people that were helping him at the end of his life probably did not care. They were probably glad to do it. So a lot of that guilt was, you know, maybe unnecessary. But I remember watching that video and thinking, is this the end result of always being here now, always being in the present and not planning for the future? So I think that is like a balance that you have to strike, like knowing what I need for down the road, but not missing what's right in front of me. Also, both are very important.
Kind of made me think of Star Wars when Yoda is talking about Luke, and he says, you know, his mind's always in the future. He's never here thinking about where he is and what he's doing. And I've mentioned the Greatest Salesman in the World before, a book that I absolutely love. And one of the things it talks about in there is, you know, I won't focus, I won't spend my time worrying about yesterday because you know, I can't go back and change anything. I can't undo the hurt that happened. I can't right the wrongs that happened, nor will I spend a bunch of time worrying about tomorrow, because why would I throw today and right now away to worry about something that may never happen, right? And I think, kind of circling back to what you said, you were talking about a lot of business owners are on someday aisle, but they're not doing anything to get off of it, right? So I remember I met a guy several years ago who owned his own business, and we were talking, and I was asking him, what's your future look like? What do you want to do? And he said, you know, my financial advisor and I have talked about, I'm going to sell my business for $16 million. So that's fantastic. You know, good for you. I'm glad you have that goal. Tell me about the business. Well, you know, it's me. And I thought, you're never going to sell this business for $16 million, because, yes, you may have a book of business that you can hand off to somebody, but that's like if I own a barber shop, right? And I have all these clients and I want to sell it to you, and my barber shop's doing $1 million a year. It's not worth $1 million a year because they're all coming to see me to cut their hair. And they may come in and see you once or twice, but if they don't like the way you cut their hair, they're going to go somewhere else, right? So I think the big thing with Someday Isle is having that plan and taking that action to get off of Someday Isle and start moving toward that dream, that goal that they have.
Yeah. Sometimes I think maybe going back to that, like how to strike a balance, like maybe the right thing is to like have the goal, but be loose and not so attached to like the journey and kind of be aware of the present and adaptive to the present. Because what I found is setting goals, it's the chasing the goal that really I love. Because what I found in my own life is every time I get to the goal, I've never yet in my life had a moment where I was like, "Oh, sweet, all right," and I just like sit and stop and relax. It's always what's next, you know, and it was a big eye opener to me to come to that conclusion that like, so I need to quit worrying about what happens when I hit the goal and just realize that what I love is the pursuit. And if I can accept that, then I can do that forever. I just, you know, just keep adapting and and having new things. And so with Sunday Isle, you know, whether it's the, you know, the beach house or the or whatever, you know, something that gets you motivated and gets you going. But when and how and if you get there and everything, you can be kind of loose and flexible on, you know.
You still need a map, right? Yeah, I can put you in a car and take your phone and the map away and say, "All right, Greg, I'll see you in you know the Keys, the Florida Keys," and it's gonna be a heck of a lot harder for you to get there if you haven't figured out how to, you know.
Dude, you can take my phone with my map app away and say, "I'll see you 10 miles from here," and I probably won't get there. So, yeah, no,
So having the map and having a timeline, and I think you're right. You know, the timeline can be flexible. Um, you just can't keep waiting, right? Because someday Isle just becomes more magnetic and it keeps you there.
something else that we've talked about it on this podcast before, but, I see this a lot, that this what happens is the reward becomes the like, the punishment, like, Sunday Isle starts as this thing that I wanna pursue that makes me feel good when I think about it, but the more time passes and I realize I'm further and further away and I'm probably not gonna get there, then it becomes this thing that makes me feel bad and like I'm, you know, like I'm a failure or whatever. And then that's not doing anyone any.
Well, you know, and it's funny because I recently had an experience like that, and it goes back to what's the lens or the frame you're looking through, right? So I can look at it as I failed, I wasn't good enough, you know, I'm insufficient, whatever it is, or I can turn and look at it and say, all right, let's look at the, you know, what's the alternative? Okay, I worked harder than I would have if I hadn't set this goal. I had more activity. I got, you know, I had more opportunities. You know, I learned more. I learned, you know, I realized that some of the plans that I set, I didn't think through as far as the timeliness, you know, how long it would take for them to come to fruition. So I expected something that wasn't realistic. But by looking at that, I learned a whole lot. So even though I didn't achieve that goal, I've now taken the opportunity to say, okay, but look at all the good stuff that came from that, right? And I can focus on that and I can celebrate that. And yeah, I can still be disappointed and mad that I didn't achieve the goal. I also know that what I learned and what, you know, the experience I got from that is going to help me achieve my next goal. So maybe it's one of those things where yeah, I may have had to take a little bit of a step back before I can take the two steps forward.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's that relates to kind of what I was saying about like not being as attached, you know, like being able to see the journey and the benefit in that, you know. I used to do jujitsu, and one of the things that one of the sayings that I heard in that that I really liked is they would say, "It's not win or lose. You win or you learn." And, I really liked that. I was like, "Okay, that's a good way to look at things." But these days, I don't even I've kinda modified that to where in my mind, it's you just learn. It's not even win or learn. It's all just learning, and you either learn what works and what you can keep doing or what doesn't and what you need to adjust. Um, because the win, again, makes it seem like a finality like, okay, I got it, and now this is the end. So it's just all learning, and it's just I'm learning that this pushes me the way I want to go, or it doesn't. You know. So yeah, the end goal I think is a good thing to have. To your point, like setting goals and stuff. Um, and then if we get there, great. Then we can just set another one. And if we don't, we learn and we, like you said, reframe it. And this is what I've gained from it. And what's next? You know. But don't forget to enjoy the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the journey, not the destination, right? And I think kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, maybe the lens to look at it through is learning is winning. Right? Because as long as we take the time to learn something and then do something with it, right? It goes back to taking that action, applying that practically, then things are just going to keep getting better.
Yeah, yeah. There's another quote I really like. It's I believe it's Aristotle. The purpose of knowledge is action, not knowledge. And I use that in my profession because what I do for a living is very, very mental. It's a lot of thinking and talking. But if all we do is think and talk, like we don't really get anywhere. So yeah, no, definitely.
Perfect spot for us to wrap up this episode of the Business Brains and BS podcast. Remember, progress beats perfection. Hope is not a strategy, but it is a necessity. And the BS that tends to hold us back usually starts in our own heads. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, and make sure that you share it with a business owner who you think needs to hear it. Until next time, we'll see you.